The Crystallization of a Woman, a short story based on the true events by Vahid Sajjadifar.
I would wake up very tired and weary from sleep, as if not sleeping at all. In the mornings, I didn't feel like getting out of bed and starting a new day at all. I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old and waking up, I didn't have a moment of calm. I didn't even like to lose a minute of the day, waking up eagerly every day. What happened that an energetic girl turned into a depressed and lifeless woman? We would wash our hands and faces and gather around the breakfast table. Mom always looked at us with her sweet smiles, and Grandpa's eyes were full of kindness. But Dad always had a cup of tea before we woke up and went to work. Those were the good old days when my brother Salim and I sat at the breakfast table and chatted a lot. Mom had prepared everything for us so that we wouldn't be late, and we quickly drank fresh tea and rushed to school. Salim used to tell me, "Simon, hurry up, because I have to get you up first before I go to school." I kept wondering to myself, why don't the freshly brewed teas have the same taste, color, and aroma anymore? Is it the fault of the new teas, or have our tastes changed? As I wandered through my memories, suddenly Ibrahim called my name and said, "Simon, it's late, you need to prepare my breakfast. I have to go to the shop." I wished I hadn't heard his rude voice at least one morning. Ibrahim was a fat man with an average height and a meaty face. His face was full of pimples. It was all Dad's fault that he handed me over to him, just because Ibrahim owned a shop and had some profit in his hands. I regretted that I couldn't finish my own studies at university and set up my own clinic. It was a shame to leave the medical field at Beheshti University like that. I wished, instead of this smelly and dirty old man, it was Reza's hands and mine. Reza was like a Prince Charming. A tall man with neat beards and mustaches and big eyes. I still remember the warmth of his hands. I wished he was here now. As Mr. John used to say, they planted me in the wrong place. I prepared breakfast, but it felt like hundreds of kilograms were tied to my feet. Ibrahim finished his breakfast, put on his coat like an impolite guest, then put on his shoes and left. Whenever he left the house, it felt like a weight was lifted off my heart. If my dad hadn't forced me to marry Ibrahim, what would my life have been like? Did I get married at all? I don't know. Maybe Reza and I had a future together. Maybe not, but if I were with Reza, we might have had a sweet daughter or a curly-haired son by now. Because back then, I didn't take birth control pills hastily out of fear of not having children. In that life, there was room for a little angel, but in life with Ibrahim, I myself was extra. Why should I sacrifice an innocent being? Did that innocent child have any sin to come into this boring life? Like many days, strange thoughts filled my head when suddenly I realized the time. Since that wretch left for work, time was passing quickly. It was 10 a.m., and I had to go shopping before Ibrahim came back for lunch. I left the house and went to the store. I bought vegetables and meat, and I went to the checkout line. I felt someone staring at me from the adjacent queue. I could feel the heaviness of his gaze. When I turned my head to ask him why he was staring at me like that, I couldn't breathe. Yes, it was him, how white his hair and beard had become. It really was Reza. Tears overflowed from my eyes involuntarily. I was so bewildered and shocked that I heard the voice of the cashier lady saying, "Excuse me, It's your turn." I accounted for the purchases in confusion and came out, but Reza was following me and shouting, "Simin, wait a moment." I stood still, my hands trembling with excitement at seeing him and my heart beating faster. He approached me and said, "Simin, I can't believe it's you. How much you've changed, but I can still see that mischievous and happy Simin in your eyes." Finally, I managed to control myself a little and said, "Reza, it's not right for us to talk." Reza interrupted me and said, "Simin, maybe it was fate's hand that brought us together again. Just think, in Tehran, many people may never meet each other in their lives. We have crossed paths again." I said, "This is just a coincidence." Then I continued, "I'm late. I have to go." Reza said, "This is my card. Call me whenever you can. I would love to know more about these years that I didn't know about you." I took the card and quickly went back home. When I arrived home, the first thing I did was to hide the card away so that Ibrahim wouldn't get his hands on it. I quickly prepared the food and started making salad. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't realize when I cut my hand and blood spilled into the salad bowl. I was still lost in my thoughts when Ibrahim's bald head appeared like a hovering cloud. I set the table, and we had lunch. I was so insignificant to him that he didn't even notice the change in my behavior. I was just his servant and concubine. Neither my birthday, nor our wedding anniversary, nor any other occasion mattered to him. All that mattered to him was that his food was ready and that he could come to me every night to fulfill his desires. Ibrahim always mocked me, saying if you were not barren, at least 2 boys would be jumping up and down in this house by now. But I preferred to endure the guilt of being barren rather than to bring an innocent kid to this miserable life. I was fed up with this life and its repetitive days. The only joy in those dark days of mine was reading novels and short stories. I immersed myself in the world of stories for hours. Many times I wished to be the protagonist of the stories, but the downside was that even in books and stories, the heroes of the stories were mostly men. Even those whose main character was a woman had miserable lives, perhaps because these stories stem from the bitter reality of our world, where women suffer. A week passed since my meeting with Reza, and I still couldn't pull myself together and return to my tiresome days. During this week, I kept blaming myself for why I took the card in the first place. On the other hand, my curiosity was driving me crazy. Had Reza not married yet? Why didn't I ask him? But if he had married, he wouldn't have hesitated to hand over the card and request a date. I was daydreaming when the home phone rang. I picked up the phone, and it was Akbar, Ibrahim's apprentice, who was shouting. I asked Akbar what happened. He said, "Sir has been shot." I asked, "What? Who shot Ibrahim?" Akbar replied, "Thieves, madam. They have taken him to the 7th of tier hospital." I dropped the phone and quickly went to the hospital, but it was too late. Ibrahim had died before reaching the hospital. But I didn't feel any sadness. I was so disgusted with myself that I even felt so much disgust towards the dead man. Even his death couldn't make my hatred go away. I couldn't forget what he had done to me. Ibrahim had never been gentle with me. Many nights, contrary to my wishes, he did whatever he wanted with me. I wanted to take revenge on the ruined years of my life from his lifeless body. I wanted to hit him so hard in the face that my anger would be relieved a bit, but these actions were futile because Ibrahim no longer felt any pain. Ibrahim's 40th day ceremony passed, and I felt a little better. Interestingly, the neighbors thought I was upset because I lost my husband, but the reality was that I was devastated since the opportunity for revenge against that vile man had slipped away. Finally, I gathered the courage to call Reza and arrange to meet him at a cafe. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep the night before our meeting. I meticulously chose my outfit and went to the cafe. It felt like I had returned to my student years. Love is capable of turning a depressed person like me into a lively and energetic being. Reza had arrived at the cafe before me. I couldn't believe fate had brought us together again. We had a lot to talk about to catch up on our past years. I started first and narrated the highlights of my life in recent years. Now it was Reza's turn to speak, but he didn't seem very eager to talk about these years. Eventually, he opened his mouth and said, "Well, these years haven't been a bed of roses for me either. Of course, you've definitely had more boring days behind you, but I haven't had a successful marriage either." I thought to myself, has Reza wanted to marry Nestoran? After all, among our friends, I thought Nestoran was the ugliest girl, a short, chubby girl with thin lips and small eyes. I told Reza that I'm sorry you didn't experience happy days either. Then Reza continued, "We became parents very soon, and now we have twins, a girl and a boy. You know, Simon, I want us to listen to our hearts now and start a new life together." Reza looked at me in astonishment and said, "We didn't separate." Immediately, I said, "Well then, are you going to separate soon, right?" Reza's puzzled look conveyed the answer to me before he could speak. After a heavy silence, Reza said, "We can start a secret relationship and taste the flavor of love without Nestoran knowing anything." I was shocked and didn't even blink. Then I picked up my bag and left the cafe with tears in my eyes. Reza ran after me to the car, hoping to persuade me to stay, but I had already made up my mind. He called my mobile phone several times a day, but I had no desire to answer. One day, without Reza noticing, I followed him from his workplace to his home. Nestoran and their twins were outside when Reza reached them. He greeted Nestoran warmly, and I realized he only wanted me for his desires. Otherwise, there was no sign of emotional divorce in their relationship. It's been about 3 years since that day. During this time, I focused on running and managing the business I inherited from Ibrahim. On the other hand, I started continuing my studies in medicine. I love my life these days, and I realize that there are also good men out there. It's not been the best of luck for me that my fate has been tied with Ibrahim and Reza.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.